Taiwan takes extreme measures to bring more rain, as a new climate report says the country's droughts are getting worse. Does Taiwan have a drinking problem? Some advocacy groups say yes, while the government steps up support for those seeking help.
I'm in the Solomon Islands, where these 80-year-old bombs are still a deadly danger. Keep watching to find out why.
Plus, tropical glaciers in the Colombian Andes may soon disappear completely, and the damage could be irreversible. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ika Vat. A new report says Taiwan is facing dangerous heat and drought from the climate crisis. Its authors hope their findings will spur the government into taking stronger measures to protect citizens. Tsai Ing-wen has the story.
Setting off flares to make it rain. This is cloud seeding, an artificial technique Taiwan's authorities are using to try to refill the country's reservoirs, many of which are running dry.
我们的水库的蓄水量就很容易，因为没有下雨，然后用水量又多，所以产生相关缺水的一个情况。
Taiwan's almost 100 reservoirs have a total capacity of over 2.5 billion cubic meters. They supply almost a quarter of the country's demand for water, with most going to cities and agricultural fields. They're filled by regular spring rains, but an unusually dry start to the year is raising concerns of water shortages going into summer. Worsening droughts are one of the key warnings of a new climate report by Taiwan's Environment Ministry in collaboration with top climate scientists. It's the first of its kind since the government passed a climate change law in January last year, with the goal of reducing the impact of climate disasters on the country. The report's authors say along with summers getting drier, they're on course to get longer and hotter too.
夏季的天数也会越来越长，最糟糕情境会达到7个月左右，那最好也会达到5个月左右。
Running over 600 pages long, Taiwan's equivalent of the UN's annual climate report paints a grim picture for the country and its citizens. Daytime temperatures reaching almost 40 degrees Celsius already pose a health hazard to vulnerable groups. Built environment experts say urban planning should be improved to lessen the danger.
我们要提早做好调试，那这个城市对抗热的时候有更好的这个容受力，利用水跟绿地让环境这个温度降低。第二是通风散热。
It's hoped that measures like these will reduce the human cost of the climate crisis. Taiwan's capital, Taipei, is heating up faster than the global average, and it's during hot summer days that many residents here will most depend on a stable water supply to keep cool. But with scientists warning of more danger ahead, if Taiwan's government doesn't take sufficient action soon, for many here, it could spell disaster. Andy Xue and Sally Ensign in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
An alcohol awareness group is calling for May 9th to be marked as an alcohol-free day to help combat one of Taiwan's biggest health risks. Marianne Struther has more.
A catch-up with friends or a thirst quencher on a hot day. Alcoholic beverages are easy to find in Taiwan. But drinks just like these cost the government over $100 million every year, as they fork out the money to cover alcohol-related medical expenses, a figure that increases to $1.5 billion when including overall economic losses. We still don't know all the possible dangers of alcohol. A new report from the World Health Organization has linked alcohol consumption to 7 types of cancer. But one group in Taiwan wants to raise awareness of the issue and is calling for May 9th to become an alcohol-free day.
从喝下去开始呢，从食道、胃、肝、胆、胰脏都会有一些状况，那甚至呢，对脑也会有问题。
Alcohol intolerance, which can increase the risk of developing certain cancers, affects nearly 8% of the global population. But a recent survey shows nearly half of Taiwan's population has it. The condition is genetic and stops alcohol from breaking down into a non-toxic substance.
喝酒脸事实上就是代表你有酒精不耐症，你的乙醛没有办法代谢掉，那个乙醛就是破坏你的细胞，破坏你的 DNA， 然后让你生病，让你得到癌症。
People can have 1 or 2 copies of the gene responsible for the intolerance, altering the severity of the condition. Studies suggest individuals with even 1 copy of the gene are as much as 10 times more likely to develop esophageal cancer than those without the gene. The government opened a new centre last year to provide consultation, screening and referral services for alcohol addiction and to further support an existing government recovery programme.
一般人如果到这个我们签约的138家戒酒的机构求助，那最高每人可以得到4万块的戒酒的补助。
These subsidies are an attempt to tackle the problem at the source, to prevent the thousands of deaths each year caused by excessive consumption. Justin Wu and Maddie Anstruther for TaiwanPlus.
If you or someone you know is struggling with alcohol addiction, please call the Taiwan Alcohol Abstinence and Addiction Prevention Centre at 02 2585 1959 for more resources. Taiwan has reported an increase in Chinese military activity near its borders after a US warship passed through the Taiwan Strait. The military says 23 Chinese warplanes were spotted in the area, 8 of which breached Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This area is not Taiwan's territory and is used by its military as a defensive buffer zone. The breaches come hours after a US warship passed through the Taiwan Strait on Wednesday morning. The Philippines military chief is accusing China of trying to spread disinformation. Philippine Defense Secretary Guibert Teodoro Jr. was responding to a leaked transcript of a phone conversation between a Philippine admiral and a Chinese official. It supposedly shows the admiral agreeing to operate fewer ships and to notify China of its missions in the South China Sea. Teodoro says he doubts the authenticity of the transcript as it could easily be fabricated. Philippine officials say the leak is Beijing trying to distract attention from its aggressive actions. Disputes between the Philippines and China are heating up in the South China Sea, with Beijing frequently blasting water cannons at Filipino Coast Guard ships. For more on the tensions, Jaime Ocon spoke to Sherwin Ona, a Philippine security analyst in Manila.
So there have been a number of security developments regarding the Philippines and China, and I wanted to first touch on Balikatan 2024, this recent exercise involving the sinking of a warship. What's been the message that the Philippines is trying to convey to Beijing?
Well, first and foremost, we have forwarded a new defense policy, the Comprehensive Archipelagic Defense Concept. This Balikatan iteration is a demonstration of that policy shift. So it's not the first time that we did SINC-X, but in this Balikatan iteration, we have seen a lot of live fire exercise, sinking exercise, at the same time, an increased tempo in our western border and our northern borders in the Otanis area, the area near Taiwan. So I think this is a strong message that the Philippines is dead serious when it comes to its shift in defense policy. And at the same time, well, on the military level, Balikatan is super helpful in terms of ensuring interoperability. So this is operation among allies, among our defense partners. But remember, in this iteration of Balikatan, the Coast Guard was also involved. It's the first time that the Philippine Coast Guard was involved. And so that would tell you that most probably the Philippines and its allies are thinking of this kind of action.
And one of the most visible disputes between the Philippines and China has been with their coast guards, with China blasting water cannons at the Philippines. I want to ask your thoughts on how the Philippines should be managing the situation, and should it be using its own water cannon?
I think we have to do what we have to do, right? I mean, we cannot renege on our responsibility to supply our outposts in Ayungin Shoal. But having said that, we have encountered, of course, some escalatory actions coming from the Chinese Coast Guard. There are many who are really agitated, especially here in the Philippines, and would like to see some retaliatory action coming from our end. But I think our President Marcos, has made it clear that we would not stoop down to that level. We don't want to lose our moral high ground at this point. And if you will just focus on the latest hosing incident, the Chinese Coast Guard ships hose ships from our fisheries agency that are doing humanitarian work. They're giving our fishermen supplies. They're aiding our fishermen. So this is a humanitarian mission. And then what do we get? We get a hosing response from the Chinese Coast Guard, aided by its militia arm.
That was our reporter Jaime Ocon speaking to Sherwin Ona, a Philippine security analyst. More remains of victims of a devastating 2021 train crash in eastern Taiwan have been found. As John Van Trieste reports, the new discovery is taking a toll on the families of those killed in the accident.
3 years after a fatal train crash in eastern Taiwan, victims' families are still far from closure. Workers have just found more remains of victims, 11 this time, and relatives have traveled to the crash site yet again to collect them. On April 2nd, 2021, a flatbed truck slid onto the tracks that connect East Taiwan with the rest of the country. An oncoming train hit the truck at the entrance to a tunnel and derailed. 49 died and around 200 were injured, making it Taiwan's deadliest train wreck in decades. After workers found new remains in 2023, victims' relatives asked for a more thorough search of the crash site. But the fact that remains keep turning up has kept relatives' wounds fresh.
它本身就是一直在营运通车，你进去也不是这么容易，心情就是既期待，但是又很纠结，但是又觉得很荒谬。
A lawyer representing victims' families is calling for new approaches to handling disasters of this scale to minimize relatives' pain.
对于这个各单位之间在灾害现场如何横向联络，而能够具体完成这些事项，要有一个沟通的模式。
The district prosecutor's office, whose staff accompanied family members to the crash site, has agreed to look into how to respond to future disasters.
我们在去年发生这个车厢内有这个疑似被害人遗骨的事件发生之后，那我们各单位也都责成尽速的去检讨后续遇到类似案件的一个搜证以及清理的作业流程。那我们会依照行政院会议所颁布的一个原则去要求督导相关的单位。
But as officials think about future disasters, the families of crash victims are still grappling with how to move on from the events of 2021. Delphine Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Tsai Ing-wen's presidency will come to an end in the coming weeks. Leslie Liao looks back on her political rise and how she won Taiwan's highest seat of office twice.
Tsai Ing-wen made history multiple times on her way to the presidency. She was the first woman to chair a major political party, the first female presidential candidate, and the first ever woman to win Taiwan's highest seat of office. And now she ends her 8 years with a performance evaluation of 60%, according to one pollster. It may not sound that high, but it's an unprecedented rating, one that far exceeds her predecessors.
There's a comparison with the end of the Ma administration and the end of the Chen administration. Now, there were different pollsters who used slightly different methodology, but the difference between their final approval ratings and hers is night and day.
But getting to where Tsai is today was a bumpy ride. Prior to taking office, she had failed presidential and mayoral bids. Tsai first rose to prominence when she was tapped as a trade negotiator for Taiwan at the World Trade Organization. She was valued for her academic background in global trade, having a PhD from the London School of Economics. Tsai then became an aide to President Lee Teng-hui. Many scholars say she helped design Lee's stance on Taiwan's relations with China.
She was widely credited with being the prime thinker behind the special state-to-state statements that President Lee Teng-hui made at the time.
Tsai had no formal political affiliation until 2004 when she joined the Democratic Progressive Party. She served briefly as a legislator for the party before taking the job of vice premier.
I think in a lot of people's minds, she was kind of considered one of, in the DPP, I think they kind of thought of her as one of us.
4 years after joining the party, Tsai ran for party chair. Her decision came while the DPP was fractured by political infighting, which hurt the party's popularity. She beat out party heavyweights because she did not have connections to any faction.
I think a lot of the spectacular rise of Tsai can be attributed to a power vacuum in the DPP. A lot of the heavyweights in the DPP have been around for much longer. People are kind of tired of seeing their faces.
Tsai ultimately held 3 separate stints as the DPP's chair.
She unified the party. She unified the factions. She was a stable, strong hand when she controlled the party.
In 2012, Tsai ran for president against then-incumbent Ma Ying-jeou of the China-friendly Kuomintang, but lost.
If you watch the debate at the time, Ma Ying-jeou came across as very presidential, very much in control. And she kind of looked like a student doing a presentation.
Tides changed in 2014 when a student-led movement broke out protesting the Kuomintang-led legislature's review of a trade agreement with China.
In the years leading up to the Sunflower Movement and so forth, she really did attract young people because of her progressive kind of political stances.
Tsai won Taiwan's 2016 presidential election, beating her KMT opponent Eric Zhu by a 25% margin. Despite a decisive first victory, her road to re-election in 2020 hit several setbacks. First, she was challenged for her party's nomination by current Vice President and President-elect Lai Ching-te.
He kind of stabbed her in the back as he promised he wouldn't challenge her.
Early on in her re-election bid, she also trailed considerably behind her main opponent, the KMT's Han Kuo-yu.
A lot of the reasons for her low approval rating was that she was not campaigning. She was busy being the president. So when she finally got out on the campaign trail and made her case, and she was good at it.
She ultimately prevailed and won 2020 in a landslide victory with a historic 8.17 million votes. Over her 8 years, Tsai oversaw major milestones in Taiwan, including pension reform, same-sex marriage legislation, navigating COVID, and managing relations with an increasingly aggressive China. She's credited with significantly raising Taiwan's international profile.
Taiwan has really gone from a place of comparative obscurity at the start of her term to one now that is hotly discussed.
But her leadership still had its controversies, failing to meet targets she campaigned on.
She campaigned on 3% of GDP on military spending all the way back in 2015. It's about 2.5% now. She campaigned on getting the minimum wage up to $30,000. It's still 27,000 something.
Come May 20th, Tsai will hand the torch over to her deputy, successor, and once rival, Lai Ching-te. Her time as president will come to an end, leaving behind a story of remarkable political success, one which Lai will have to work hard to match. James Lin and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Tune in all this week and for our series looking back on Tsai Ing-wen's presidency. Chinese President Xi Jinping is meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán on the final leg of a state visit to Europe. China and Hungary are expected to sign up to 18 new cooperation agreements, including one linked to Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. Xi's trip, his first to Europe in 5 years, has also taken him to France and Serbia. As geopolitical tensions in Asia rise, the effects of past conflicts, some going back decades, are still felt today. Louise Watt travelled to the Pacific nation of the Solomon Islands, where remnants of World War II are still causing suffering.
Long-time teacher Mavelyn Pitanoy is baking bread in her kitchen in the Solomon Islands to sell and as a therapy. Kneading the dough helps strengthen her muscles, torn in an explosion caused by a bomb left over from World War II. It was hidden in a garden and went off when she and her church group were cooking outside, killing 2 people and leaving Pitanoy with multiple injuries.
My left hand lacerated from the shoulder right up to my fingers. I lost 3 fingers, and this one was hanging low, leaving only the bones.
Pitanoy is one of an unknown number of Solomon Islanders who are killed or maimed each year by ordnance left over from World War II. This island of Guadalcanal was a key Pacific battleground then, where clashes between Allied and Japanese forces turned the course of the war against Japan. But that wartime legacy remains a reality for residents here today. Within a space of 10 years, Solomon Islanders have found 40,000 items of unexploded ordnance, 8,000 on this site alone when it was being cleared to build this stadium in the capital. Hundreds of thousands of unexploded ordnance are estimated to still be around. Most of it is American. Now, an NGO with funding from the US State Department is mapping former battlefield sites, looking for unexploded bombs and mortars, and attempting to create the Solomon Islands' first national survey of unexploded weapons.
It's not that surprising that there's this much left over. It was a very, very bloody campaign, and it was very intense and lasting almost a year. But where's all that ammunition going to go? What happens to it? And there was no serious cleanup.
The problem is set to get worse. As competition for housing and land grows, people are moving into new areas that were previously undisturbed, raising the risk of more accidental injuries, like Pitanoy's. Having left teaching, she still works to create educational materials, wanting to raise awareness of the dangers of unexploded ordnance.
Everybody must be aware that we in the Solomons, we are living on a ticking bomb. And they are around as a result of the World War, what they have left behind, what they didn't come back to clean up. And it's haunting us.
The bombs are from a conflict that ended before Pitanoy and most of her fellow Solomon Islanders were born. The suffering they are causing, a reminder that the wounds of war last long after the fighting ends. Klein Wong and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Baseball star Shohei Ohtani's former interpreter says he'll plead guilty to stealing from him. Prosecutors allege Mizuhara Ippei stole $16 million from the Japanese Dodgers pitcher. He says he'll plead guilty to bank fraud and submitting a false tax return, crimes that can lead to up to 33 years in prison. Prosecutors say Mizuhara took advantage of his relationship with Ohtani to fuel his gambling habit. Court charges will be heard on May 14th. As climate change continues to fuel warmer global temperatures, South America's tropical glaciers are at risk of disappearing. Wesley Lewis takes a look.
Shrinking in size, the Ritacuba Blanco Glacier in the Colombian Andes is falling victim to the effects of climate change. Tropical alpine glaciers like this one have existed here for hundreds of thousands of years, but may soon disappear.
Y este año cada vez que sube uno está peor. Ya vi una grieta nueva, ya vi más descongelado más arriba. Ya.
Until a few months ago, the top of Ritacuba Blanco was blanketed in a solid layer of ice and snow. Now, large fissures have appeared in the ice sheet. Scientists say climate change has exacerbated the effects of El Niño, a climate phenomenon that brings unusually hot weather.
Bueno, el fenómeno del Niño es quizá lo peor que le puede pasar a nuestros nevados o glaciares colombianos, porque hay ausencia de nubosidad y por lo tanto no precipita nieve en los glaciares, que es lo que necesitamos para que se mantengan.
Almost all the world's tropical glaciers are in the Andes mountain range. At the beginning of the 20th century, Colombia had 12 tropical glaciers. Now, only 6 remain. National park staff are worried that the receding glaciers will threaten the region's fresh water supplies and impact the local tourism industry.
Tristeza, nostalgia, porque aparte de que se va a perder una fuente económica que es el turismo, los habitantes de acá, de Huicán, del Cocuy, de estos municipios, y en sí pues de todo el departamento, de todo Colombia, nos vamos a ver muy afectados por la escasez de agua.
Scientists say the melting glaciers reflect the impact of climate change. Colombia's neighbor Venezuela has already become the first country in recent history to lose all its glaciers.
Consecuencia, en menos de 100 años se han perdido más de 400 hectáreas de glaciar, lo que queda apenas es 2 hectáreas de glaciar. En consecuencia podemos decir que eso es un glaciar muerto y eso es producto precisamente de diferentes factores, entre ellos el tema del cambio climático.
With global temperature records broken monthly, many glaciers around the world are expected to melt in the coming years. And scientists are calling on world leaders to act quickly before the glaciers are gone. Delphine Chen and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we'll leave you with images of the 19th century ship, the Belém, which is carrying the Olympic torch to France. I'm Kavat. Take care. See you next time.